Hi and Assalamualaikum. My name is Mariam Syafiqah Mazlan. My matrix card number is 2021-477-858. And I'm going to start with my presentation introduction. Indonesia started a rapid process of government decentralization in 1999, which was a strong centralized government structure. Many Indonesians expect that the reform that have already begun since the end of Suharto rule in 1998 will be continued and accelerated. Because of ongoing interaction between government entities with varied structure position or between higher and lower levels of government, decentralization may be understood at the organizational level of government. In conclusion, decentralization provides a number of benefits, but it must be implemented properly. It also has hazards and opportunities of its own. For instance, decentralization increases the capacity for place-based policies and is beneficial for mobilizing local public resources. Lowering costs increases incentive for proactive local development strategies and improving the delivery of local public service. These policies are accompanied by their own hazards such as scale disadvantage,
Hi, Assalamualaikum. My name is Wan Hasmi Nawawi Biwan Anwar, and right now I'm going to present about the challenges for good governance in this disadvantaged region. The most evident gap in decentralized governance in Indonesia after 2001 is the failure to execute a large-scale solution to eliminate gaps in capacity and resources, despite the fact that the Kementerian Desa Pembangunan Daerah Tertinggal dan Transmigrasi Kemendesa and the Ministry of Home Affairs MOHA have confirmed that the government has acknowledged the problems of low capacity and limited resources that the disadvantaged region faces. They continue to use the same basic policy model for all autonomous regions, from the richest and most developed to the poorest and most undeveloped. The basic principle has been charged in that the central government has established political deals with Aceh, Papua and West Papua to allocate a higher portion of resource revenues to them via the tax sharing system. The Kemendesa and the MOHA are two important ministries with overlapping regency and village government responsibilities. Vertical and horizontal operations of central, provincial and district responsibilities have proven challenging and perplexing. Although functional assignment between central and sub-national administrations is the heart of decentralization, it has proven difficult to achieve in practice, which is quoted by Puanto and Prosinto in 2018. According to Hill, we know that the economic differences between the richest and the lowest are more than 50 times per capita. Additionally, the more developed areas are far better at making their own money. For example, we use Lamongan in East Java gains from its capacity to draw business investment because we know it is closest off to the Surabaya, Indonesia's second largest city. Meanwhile, a lack of skill has prevented disadvantaged areas of having the chance to strive. And we know that due to the scale of restrictions, the most domestic and international investment has been sparse in regions like Timur Tengah Selatan, which is TTS. And despite this, the Indonesian government acknowledges the urgent need to reduce the disparity in human well-being between undeveloped and developed areas. Both Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono and President Joko Widodo announced poverty reduction, and to achieve this capacity building in the eastern Indonesia is a crucial development goal. And in addition, we know that Indonesia's National Development Plan emphasizes the need of giving people in underprivileged areas a higher priority for development. The need to hasten development in undeveloped areas was also addressed in Indonesian government regulation number 78 2014. Indonesian economic performance and challenges. Since 2001, Indonesia has been involved in a decentralization program that has drastically altered the politics and economics of the world's fourth biggest state. We know that decentralization became legislation in Indonesia in 1999 with the objective of improving local government's responsiveness to local circumstances. But studies constantly correlate decentralization to higher national economic development. Simply put, we can say that if dissertation results in policies that support local growth, the overall influence of this law should improve the nation's financial performance. As a consequence, decentralization is a national development plan with the ability to deliver outcomes for the growth of the country itself. And by the law 28 on a local revenue was also approved by the administration, allowing local governments to prolong their taxable revenue during the interim years. The numbers of municipal roles surged in the years after the statute. This does not significantly show, but this increasingly the capacity of local administrations in districts and cities. In particular, in 2014, we know that Jakarta passed a new decentralization law that retains the concurrent function of government administration while handing increased authority to provincial government bodies at the cost of the district governments. In Indonesia decentralized system, there were various institutional challenges to overcome. Deep decentralization's attempt in the early years 2001 till 2004 exacerbated that situation, which is requiring Jakarta to intervene with its concurrent event decentralization legislations. People grew unduly reliant on the federal government actually as a result of this initiative, which had a negative interaction impact. The central government must create a new institutional strategy in order to separate the economic policy and infrastructure development, and these tasks are shared by the federal and municipal governments. The joint plan intends to strengthen local governments through budgetary allocations and Jakarta's help in development programs. To this, the central government must have the political will to gradually devolve its power in the local government, provided that a sufficient level of institutional quality is met. The third one we can say that about to discuss right now about the problem of implementation, which is TTS regencies. Experience demonstrates that the model of decentralized governance applied three significantly underperforms in the first two of these two major criteria. Underdeveloped nations are distinguished by the poor economics, high employment rates, a limited development potential, and scarcity of resources. The disparities across areas in Indonesia have expanded significantly as a result of decentralizations, and TTS is experiencing the impacts. And when it comes to taxes devolution, it will be said that TTS lacks the ability to create its own finances, leaving it almost entirely reliant on federal government during and associated auditing processes. However, because the central government has its own bureaucracy and make judgments concerning local policy, it may still veto decisions made by the regency concerning about the regency's inadequate administrative capacity further limit its administrative authority. Nonetheless, it will be demonstrated that political decentralization performed better in one essential sense. Initially, it appeared that there was a great deal of confusion about how authority and functions were split among the three levels of government: national, provincial, and regional. As a result, we know that public law was created in an attempt to settle the conflicting obligations and practices. Despite the government's best efforts, this problem persisted even after the approved Law 23/2014 on the municipal governance and implemented other adjustments in 2015. Administrative charges have been implemented that the rejected and implemented again as a part of legislative review of the decentralization strategy. According to senior ministry official in Jakarta and TTS, the present major policy review is ongoing without a definitive answer to the policy issues. The MOHA, Director General Regional Autonomy, raised concern about the impact of decentralized operation. Despite the recent withdrawal of certain agency powers, the Law of Republic of Indonesia No. 6, 2040 controlling villages has imposed additional requirements on village leaders, which is Kepala Desa, and village council, which is Dewan Desa. In villages, there is more opportunity to the cultural variety, and the government is a better support because they equipped to respond to the demands of the people who live there. Village budgets are not directly supported by the state in order to allow communities to to have more authority on their own finances. While the Law 6 2014, according to a number of Indonesians analysts, was intended to address concerns of poor local involvement at the village level, as well as lack of financial management skills. According to common desa underprivileged communities, including those in TTS Regency, have a very low village development index, which is IDM. The findings of the TTS interviews revealed that the village chiefs and council on TTS were overburdened with administrative responsibility, which is, we know that they now share their experience with Regency administrations.
Next, I'll be presenting government finance. Local government already have extensive spending autonomy, which reduces the federal government's control. Local governments, on the other hand, still have limited ability to collect taxes and borrow. The central government collects large amount of taxes and has access to domestic and international financial markets. To keep it inflation low, the central government stopped borrowing from the central bank, Bank of Indonesia, to finance the budget as deficit in 1996. President Suharto administration earned and received all government revenue from natural resources, which is the taxation and non-taxation, including land and property taxes, which is foreign aid and loans. The central government also tightly supervised the quantify and structure of budget spending by local government, and the local government also only have been given the minor taxes, and the federal government set the rates of these taxes within the legal framework, and the Ministry of Finances General of Taxation was responsible of collecting the key taxes. Until recently, the central government was in charge of collecting land and building taxes. So, following the reform, the originating provinces and districts receive a share of natural resources tax revenue. During President Suharto's administration, the central government relent a portion of its foreign aid and issued loans of subnational governments. In 1988, the federal government established the Regional Development Account, which is the RDA, as the principal resource of domestic finance for both local governments and local enterprises. So, we can see that the foreign and domestic loans were used by subnational governments for local investment projects such as village improvements project, urban drinking water supply projects, and market facilities or small retail areas. During the Asian financial crisis of 1997 to 1998, the central government injected sovereign bonds to recapitalize the financially troubled regional development banks. President Suharto's administration enhanced the central government's authority by integrating development planning and allocating development, which is the project and the funds, to the lower levels of government through a series of presidential instructions, which is the Instruksi Presiden Impres, and the international funders such as the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank and the United States Agency for International Development Finance, several Impres initiatives such as urban and rural development projects, reforestation, and regreening. The Central Planning Agency was principally responsible for determining the overall size and distribution of general and specific Impres programs, which is the Badan Perancangan dan Pembangunan Nasional, BAPPENAS. And then I'll continue to present the debt financing. Okay, at the present, no Indonesian subnational government has issued local currency bonds in order to diversify financing and attract the required resources of infrastructure projects. And debt financing is often only available to wealthy subnational governments in countries with sophisticated financial markets and a strong rule of law that promotes transparency and protects property rights and also enforces the contracts. In Indonesia, accounting standards or practices disclosure requirement, issue corporate and governance, and also bankruptcy legislation and processes must all be addressed. Debts are to be repaid using money generated by production investments, and also the Indonesia lacks of cash-rich domestic institutional investors such as insurance firms, pension funds, and also mutual funds, as well as a shadow banking structure to absorb the bonds. Unlike numerous European countries and Japan, Indonesia lacks of prosperous postal savings bank, which is the Cargill and Yoshino 2003. Until recently, the commercial banking industry was the backbone of Indonesia's financial system in terms of assets and branch networks. Bank lending, rather than issuing the bonds of shares in the stock market, is the principal kind of financial intermediation. Real estate secures a large portion of the finance, and bank activities are mostly focused on traditional deposit taking and lending, with limited emphasis on the capital and bond markets. This is owing to President Suharto's administration's lengthy period of budgetary restraint from 1966 to 1998, and the availability of low-cost, low-risk funding from state-owned banks reduces the corporate sector's need to issue bonds or stock shares. Moving on to the next point, I'll be presenting the state-owned enterprise. The economy of Indonesia is diversified. In addition to delivering public goods, the public sector at all levels includes state-owned enterprise, which is the SOEs, and that the manufacture private goods and engage with in a wide range of economic sectors, including oil and mining, plantations, electricity, sea, air, and also the land transport, hotels, and retails. Land and forests are also owned by the government, and some of the SOEs sprang from former Dutch enterprises nationalized during the mid-1950s, conflict over the present day in Papua, and the recent former British enterprises were nationalized during the violent war that followed Malaysia and Singapore's independence from England. Some losses sustained by SOEs during President Suharto's reign, such as subsidies, lending, and directed credit by state bank, are deemed quasi-fiscal activities by public banks, and subsidized loans were commonly received at the time by politically connected group, and this government contingent liability became the future budget commitment that were not recognized until cash payment were made. All provinces and really of the past have RBDs to mobilize long-term deposit for financing long-term investment projects in their respective provinces. We can see that in reality, regional development banks save money provided from the central governments to local governments to reinvest it in Jakarta in SBI, which is the Certificate Bank of Indonesia, and certificates government bonds. The majority of their credits are utilized by cars and residences for local government leaders.